Turning back, she walked out of the gym without another glance. I resisted the urge to groan. Isaac getting on edge can only mean it's nothing good. The guy had balls made of steel. He hardly ever let anything get to him. He was as emotionless as a rock when he was in his gamma mode. Isaac, my gamma, Bentley's son. The first thing I did after agreeing to take up Meredith's offer was find him. He was training for his gamma position, so I knew where he was. He was where everyone went to training. I wondered if the news of Duskfall's demise had gotten to him. My heart bled for the man I didn't know but felt related to. I couldn't even begin to imagine the kind of shock and trauma he'd go through. I dropped everything on spot to go there. Meredith had encouraged me, personally bringing me there to tie up loose ends before beginning the next chapter of my life. When I arrived at the training grounds, his mentors had said that the news did reach him, but he wasn't taking it well. He'd shut himself in his room for days, not bothering to come out. The mentors couldn't force him out either, so they left food for him outside the door. Anytime they came back to check, the plate would be gone. The loss hurt him badly. I expected it to. No one could possibly be okay after receiving news of everything and everyone you loved burning into ashes and you weren't there to help. If he was anything like me, he must have felt responsible. He would have felt guilty. I remember my first encounter with him perfectly. Every detail of our conversation burned into my mind. The mentor led me down the hall, the heavy oppression of power weighing me down. The testosterone and aggression filtering through this house was intense. Males who lived here were training to be either a beta or gamma, so naturally the aura around the house would be immense. The female sanction was in another building miles away. We walked on for a few minutes in silence. His mentor was built up with muscles clearly defined from his thin shirt. A big man who had fought many battles and won many battles from the tattoos riddling his biceps, a warrior at his prime. We stopped in front of a door near the end of the hall. The mentor looked at me, eyes a little wary, before nodding to the room. "This is it," he said roughly. He folded his arms across his chest and sighed heavily. His hard eyes darted to search my face, and from the moment it connected, I knew he was having second thoughts about allowing me to see him. He was worried about Isaac. Almost every trainer was. This was the first time it happened, a lone man training only to hear that his entire pack was wiped out, Alpha and Luna included. For him, no one could ever understand his pain. He was alone, no family, no pack to return to. All his training to be a gamma gone to waste, because how could he be a gamma to a pack that no longer existed? He lost everything, his family, friends, pack, purpose, and the worst part was that he was training in order to be able to protect his pack, yet he wasn't there when they needed him. He was, in a way, a rogue. I have to warn you, Dollface, Isaac hasn't been very. He made a face. His eyebrows knit together, and his lips pulled back in a line. Kind to people lately. I'll stay out here in case anything happens, but, do be careful. He moved out of the way. Taking his advice into consideration, I lifted my hand and gently knocked on his door. To my surprise, the moment my knuckles touched the wood, the door creaked open. It wasn't locked. The room was dark. No light lit up the room. I wasn't even sure if anyone was inside until I heard a gruff, "Get out!" It wasn't a request. It was an order. My wolf instantly growled at the disrespect toward us, but I pushed her down. My human side understood where the hostility came from, but my wolf was blinded by her pride. Shaking off any hesitation inside me, I steeled myself and stepped closer. I said. The voice got louder, harsher. "Get out!" I frowned. His voice was raspy, almost dry. He sounded sick. I had to get through to him somehow, but what do I say? How do I start a conversation? I had a million things I wanted to say all at once. I wanted to tell him about Bentley, about how he was like a father to me. I wanted to talk about how he often talked about him like he was the most precious thing in the world. I wanted to tell him I was sorry for being too weak to do anything, to be the only one that survived when literally everyone in that pack deserved to. I wanted to tell him I understood, to tell him I know he feels, how losing everything feels. But all that came from my mouth was, I was there. The silence on his end told me he knew what I was talking about. that he had heard me. Next thing I knew, I heard a thunder of rushed footsteps heading my way. I stayed rooted to my spot when he emerged from the darkness. His dark hair was very similar to Maria's from the pictures I've seen, bluish-green eyes identical to Bentley's. He was a handsome man, tall and muscular, with a stubble on his face. Dark circles rimmed around his eyes. "Who are you?" he asked hoarsely. I felt rather than saw him shaking. His voice broke in the tiniest ways. The little tremor from his words as he spoke, the misty eyes he desperately tried to control. The pain was fresh in his heart, and I had just added salt to the wound. But I had to tell him. "I stayed at Duskfall for 2 months," I said quietly, feeling the need to explain. I worked for Bentley. I worked for your dad." Isaac's eyes widened in realization, and before I could even comprehend it, he smiled. A small, almost sad smile curled on his face. His eyes lightened as he took me in from head to toe, like I was some mystic being he never believed to exist. "So you're her," he said, almost in a daze. "You're Celine." My eyebrows shot up in question. The mentor guy who was still standing there watched the exchange with interest. Isaac didn't seem to mind. He was fully aware of the large man standing to the side, leaning against the wall, but his focus was on me. "Dad, he wrote about you," Isaac said, clearing his throat after mentioning his father. "Told me he met someone who got Lyra to start talking more. That this Celine was a sweet girl he wanted me to meet." He laughed quietly to himself, wiping his eyes with the heel of his palm. "I wish we could have met in other circumstances, but I guess I'll take what I can." Isaac hung his head low, no doubt feeling everything all over again. Cautiously, I reached out to touch his face. Isaac froze, body tensing under my touch, but didn't make a move to push me away. So as gently as I could, I slid my hand over the back of his neck and pulled him down. I pulled him lower and lower until his head was resting on my shoulder. "I'm so sorry," I whispered. "Bentley changed my life. He and Lyra and everyone in the pack gave me purpose, but I couldn't do anything to help. I couldn't even save Lyra. I'm so sorry, Isaac. I failed everyone. I'm so sorry." Each word got remotely deeper and deeper, all the emotions I was trying to bury slipping through my mask of indifference. Isaac remained quietly still in my embrace. I didn't notice his trainer had left, giving us a moment of privacy. Isaac still didn't say anything, but he slowly wrapped his arms around me, pulling me closer as something warm began to drip down my shoulder. "My dad, did he ever talk about me?" A short laugh left me, fragments of my memories flashing through my mind, all the time. "Was he? Proud?" Pulling from his hold, I cupped his cheeks in my hands and smiled. Always. Once Isaac had calmed down, he let me in his room. He apologized for the mess. The mess being the torn papers scattered all over the floor, ripped clothes, broken bed, and holed walls with the size of a fist. We sat on his couch, which was the only piece of furniture that didn't meet his wrath besides the framed photos of his family. Lyra was in one of them. She was staring down, her little legs bent as she squatted to stare at the sunflower growing from the ground. "We took that last year," Isaac explained, noticing what caught my attention. I nodded and tore my gaze away. My wolf whimpered at the thought of the little girl and slinked back into the corner of my mind. Isaac sat beside me, his body once more hunched over with grief. "Where are you staying now?" he suddenly asked me. I glanced over to him before staring at the ground. "Greyhound." I felt him flinch at the name. Greyhound and Duskfall were not allies, but they weren't exactly enemies. For the most part, they were civil. They just had different views on things. Duskfall believed in voluntary training, whereas Greyhound believed in mandatory training. This meant that in Duskfall, wolves weren't required to undergo training unless they wanted to apply for positions. The opposite was believed in Greyhound. "They let you stay there?" he asked, confusion clearly in his tone. Opposing packs hardly ever took in members from the other. I mumbled a soft yes before staring at him straight in the eyes. It was now or never. "I want you to join me." Isaac furrowed his eyebrows together. Confusion set in his rugged features as he shook his head. "They won't accept me. I'm a Gamma. I trained to be a Gamma Celine. The current Gamma will feel threatened by me and all hell will break loose. It won't end well." The future alpha just offered you a position, boy. Our heads whipped to the direction of the door. Meredith stood at the doorway, hands behind her back as she walked toward us. Isaac stood up, bowing his head in respect before lifting his gaze. Alpha Crestfield, he acknowledged. Meredith smiled, nodding for him to take a seat as she got closer. It would seem that her words didn't fully reach him, so she repeated it again. Celine will be taking over my position soon, and she needs a gamma. She turned to me. Isn't that right, Celine? I smiled at her. Bringing my attention back to Isaac, whose eyes were wide with shock, I shrugged. I could really use a gamma. More preferably, you. Only if you want it. If you don't, it'll be my honor. And then, 2 years later, I was titled Alpha, and I chose him as my gamma. Just like what happened to me, a few were unhappy with an outsider having a position. But like me, he held his own against the challenges. I had told him why I was doing it. I explained my purpose. I told him I wanted revenge, and he more than willingly agreed to help me. He wanted their blood as much as I did. Standing up, I walked out the gym and noticed that Noah was still waiting outside. He looked at me, a small smile playing on his lips as he dropped his gaze to my ring. He whistled. Shiny. I rolled my eyes and swatted at him with the towel, to which he avoided smoothly. He fell into step with me as I walked down the pack house, looking for where Isaac was dawdling around. I couldn't deny that I was getting worried. It wasn't often where Isaac would get so worked up about something. He only ever did if it was something grave or if it was about the rogues. Isaac's in your office. Noah answered my unspoken question suddenly. I said nothing as we turned to my office. Twisting the doorknob open, I caught a whiff of Isaac's scent all around the room. He was pacing, not even noticing us walking in. The look on his face was concerning. It took him a full minute to realize I was standing there. When his eyes met mine, he straightened, all traces of nervousness gone from his expression, but I knew better. What's going on? I deadpanned. Isaac glanced over at Noah before swallowing. They caught rogues, 2 of them. The Chancellor is calling for a meeting involving all alphas to decide what to do with them. I soaked in his words, feeling slight dread come over me. All alphas, huh? I knew this day was coming, the day where I'd have to see them again, to face the people who tore me down and forced me into who I am today. When? Tomorrow. I pinched the bridge of my nose in irritation. Of fucking course. Looking at Noah, I mind-linked him to get the car ready. A room full of alphas is a room full of aggressive tension that could easily break if one were to say the wrong thing. Noah excused himself, already beginning to prepare for tomorrow. When he closed the door shut, Isaac scowled at the floor. It's them, Celine. Isaac's gaze hardened as fire swirled in the thick of his emotions, his fists clenched, veins adorning his skin. Theo and Val. They were caught. Landon's Pav. My eyes snapped open, my heart pounding out of my chest as I sat up in panic. My hands balled around the thick blanket over my legs and yanked it off in frustration. I wasn't surprised to find it soaking from the sweat pouring out of me. My hands were shaking, body trembling from my nightmare. It happened again. I had that same fucking nightmare, and the subject of the said nightmare was the same as usual. My mate, Celine. I sighed, running my hands down my face and hunched over the bed. This was the 2nd week since I started getting these nightmares. It was always the same thing. I would see her face twisting in pain. The night when we found out we were mates, the face she made of excitement and happiness before turning to one of grief when I said those words to her. I won't accept you, Celine. I never will. I cringed at the face she made, the look of pure devastation as her heart broke. I felt it within me, our bond resisting the pain I knowingly inflicted on her, those pale blue eyes glazing over with tears caused by me, the way her body shook when we severed our bonds, then the way she turned back in the van and met my eyes while I held on to Hestia. A flare of anger brewed inside me. I threw my head back, eyes shut in attempt to calm myself. It was 4 years ago. 4 years since I last saw my moon-given gift. 4 years since I broke her little heart for her sister, the sister who found her mate 3 weeks ago. Growling in aggravation, I pounded my fist against the bed I now slept alone in. Hestia, since finding her mate, decided to sleep separately in a guest room. She wanted time to think about what to do with her mate. The thought angered me. She was hesitating in rejecting her mate for me when I didn't even falter in rejecting mine. Not even when it was her own sister. Hestia was my wife, she bore my mark, held the title as Luna, and most importantly, carries my pup. And she has the nerve to need time to think? I couldn't help but think about Celine being in her position. How Selene would have looked with my mark, the Luna title, and lastly, carrying my pup. A ghost of a smile spread across my lips. She would have been a good mother. Selene always did love pups. She had a maternal instinct in her that Luna's typically had. When Hestia found out she was pregnant, I was ecstatic. I was going to be a dad. I'd have my future alpha in my arms, but she didn't share that view. Hestia was frightened, even considering abortion. She claimed she was too young at 22 to have a child. My wolf was enraged at the fact she even considered abortion. Not that he ever really liked her in the first place. He was always against my relationship with Hestia since the very start. He only ever wanted his mate, Selene. Now that was impossible. I couldn't feel her anymore. Not after the night of Duskfall's ruin. I remember how frantically she was trying to reach me, and in spite, I marked Hestia. Hestia was already getting annoyed at my refusal to mark her. I waited a good 2 months to do it. Frankly, I still thought it was too early. I didn't want to have any regrets, but feeling Selene coaxing me to talk to her frustrated me. It frustrated me to think that I was so close into giving in that night. So to convince myself she had no control over me, I marked her sister and mated her the same minute. That was when the bond stopped. I wasn't sure if she died. Most people said she did. Her parents said she did. They, too, couldn't feel the bond. I always wondered why they treated Selene the way they did. It had to be more than simple favoritism. It didn't make any sense, but I never bothered to question it. Hestia always had my attention since day one. She was the prettiest girl in the pack, the most popular, friendly, kind. She was everything her wallflower sister wasn't. Granted, Selene was also beautiful, but her beauty was overshadowed by her sister's. Anyone would have done the same. They would have gladly chosen Hestia over Selene. I know it's selfish, but it's my life. I should be able to choose who I want, and in that moment, I wanted Hestia. But there was always that small part of me that wondered what life would have been like with Selene. Had I not chosen Hestia and given in to the mate bond, would my life be any different? Would we have pups right now? 4? 3? Would we have been happy? A knock on the door snapped me from my thoughts. I was being foolish. The past was the past, and nothing could be done now. Grabbing a shirt from the floor, I slid it on and walked over to answer it. I opened it to find Beta Benicio, Hestia, and Selene's father standing outside. "Alpha, we have a message from the Chancellor." My face hardened. The Chancellor? What could he possibly want? What is it? Beta Benicio looked around cautiously before answering in MindLink. 2 rogues were caught. Apparently, they're both high in rank. The Chancellor is calling upon all Alphas to decide what to do with them. He wants everyone to go to the capital tonight. My eyebrows rose at his words. All Alphas? Including the Hellhound and the Bloodlust Alpha? Beta Benicio grimaced at the names and nodded. The Hellhound was quite infamous. From tales of how she mercilessly hunted down rogues to viciously cutting down Alphas who tried to challenge her, she became a myth, a legend. No one has ever seen her, but we all knew she existed. The only thing they knew was that she was Alpha Crestfield's daughter, the new Alpha of the Greyhound Pack. The Hellhound never went to social events, not even the annual galas. Usually, it would have been a sign of disrespect to all Alphas who attended, but no one dared to call her out on it. That was the kind of fear that'll strike in anyone when this person is the leader of the second most powerful pack. Not even I would try to cross her. The Bloodlust Alpha was in a similar boat. Mysterious but ridiculous strong. I've only seen him once in my life, and it was during a challenge for his territory. I was only 15 at the time. My father wanted to bring me along to show me what a true Alpha was like. The Bloodlust Alpha was a year older than me, but he looked mature. He looked experienced in battles. He killed a man thrice his age without even a sign of regret. snapped his neck off his shoulders with blood spluttering out like a damned fountain. That was the last time someone tried to challenge him. I sighed, nodding at Beta Benicio, the two most deadliest of alphas in the same room. This was going to be a hellhole. I straightened my tie, giving myself a once-over in the mirror when the door pulled open. Hestia came in wearing a light blue dress, showing off her curves and slight baby bump. She agreed to attend the party with me because of her title, but it was mostly me pressuring her to attend. She was afraid of the alphas going to be there and vocally told me she'd rather stay home. I had to use my alpha command on her to finally get her into going. As much as I would have loved to leave her home, going to the meeting without my Luna would raise unwanted eyebrows to question my authority. We were already at the Capitol, staying at one of the guest rooms the Chancellor gave every alpha pair. We weren't staying the night, but we did need to take a few hours' rest since arriving earlier this day. The meeting was going to take place in 30 minutes. I already felt tense with tension. Coming face to face with men and women who wanted more land to themselves, it wouldn't be a surprise if one of them issued a challenge to an alpha. It usually happened during these meetings because they'd all take the time to survey the competition. I would have to be very careful in controlling my emotions. Anything can go wrong in a room full of alphas. Alpha, it's time. Beta Benicio was dressed in his own suit looking sharp for the meeting. Typically, the Alpha, Luna, and Beta were permitted in the room. Though the Luna and Beta didn't have a say, they were allowed to take a seat inside. It was a sign of respect more than it was a sign or equality among ranks. Taking Hestia's hand, who loosely let me hold it, I forced down my frustration with her and walked down the hall. I could already feel the power radiate from the alphas a few doors down. Hestia trembled, feeling oppressed by the pressure suddenly weighing her down. She wouldn't be able to handle staying in that room. With a frustrated sigh, I squeezed her hand and dragged her to the conference room. When we stepped in, 7 of the 10 alphas were already inside. All male. Their mates were in the back of the room, conversing among themselves with the betas beside them. It looks like the Hellhound nor the Bloodlust Alpha has yet to arrive. Recognizing the familiar faces of Alpha Reynolds and Alpha Say, I greeted them with Hestia falling short behind me. She kept her head down, clearly affected by the aura the alphas were giving out. "Lift your head, Hestia." I mind-linked her. She raised her head an inch before looking down once more in submission. My wolf snarled in annoyance, hating how weak Hestia was making herself look. As the Luna, bowing her head meant showing weakness. She was embarrassing not only herself but the pack. She held the Luna title, yet she wasn't acting like one. "Ah, Alpha Walker, it's been a while. I see you brought your mate." My smile wavered, but I quickly masked it with a laugh. "Yes, I did. I see yours is making herself acquainted with the other Lunas. Hestia, darling, why don't you join them? Make some friends for yourself?" Hestia nodded, looking relieved, and quickly walked her way to the group of women huddled around in the corner. Once she was out of sight, I felt a gush of air leave me. "So I hear the Hellhound is coming," said Alpha Say, folding his arms across his chest. "Apparently so. Haven't seen Alpha Crestfield since they suddenly announced Meredith Crestfield in stepping down. I didn't even know she had a daughter." Alpha Reynolds added. Alpha Say hummed in agreement, looking at the seats. The round table had 11 seats in total, 1 at the very end of the oval where the Chancellor would sit, and then 5 on each side. The first and second ranking pack leaders would sit at his sides. The first, being the Bloodlust Alpha, Alpha Locksworth, would sit at his right. The second, being the Hellhound, Alpha Crestfield, would sit on his left. The rest would follow suit in order. My pack was ranked 6th. I frowned. When my father was Alpha, he ranked 4th. Alpha Reynolds' eyes scanned the other alphas in the other side of the room, his hard gaze zeroing on Alpha Windrill, who was walking our way. "Great. The sexist pig is heading this way," he mumbled annoyedly. Alpha Windrill was a despicable man. He believed that women shouldn't have any power in his pack, that the men were the superior sex, and all that women were good for was to indulge in and impregnate. He also didn't believe in the concept of mates, having a harem of his own, including his mate. He had no Luna, no Beta, and no Gamma. He'd rotated other members periodically, so no one could stay in one position for too long. The only one in power was him. There'd been countless attempts to overthrow him, the Chancellor heading these meetings as the instigator. It would have worked, but in order to successfully overthrow an alpha who hadn't died, breached lupine law, or been challenged, the pack in question would have had to cast their votes in. As it was, they were all terrified of him. They'd been forced into submission, and none of them had spoken against their alpha. As much as the Chancellor would have wanted to cast Windrill out, he couldn't. Not when no lupine laws could have been proven to be breached. Not when his pack didn't vote him out. Williams may be Chancellor, but even he can't act outside his authority. As much as I hated to admit it, Alpha Windrill was a strong man, very capable if you look past his very apparent flaws and oversized ego. He ran the pack since he was only 17 up to now and never let his rank fall, until, that is, the Hellhound came around and brought her pack from number 8 to number 2. His eldest son, Cade, was accompanying him instead of his mate. Cade was well over the age of being capable to take over, but the greedy fucker wanted to hold on to his title for as long as he could. From how I see it, Cade was a good man. Nothing like his father. Why he didn't try to challenge him for the title, I didn't know. Alpha Walker, Alpha Say, and of course, Alpha Reynolds. He smirked as he looked at each and every one of us. His narrowed eyes took us in, no doubt trying to figure us out. His cockiness and arrogance practically seeped into his words. It's been far too long. I hate that the only time we ever see each other is when we have these rogue issues. He shook his head in false disappointment before the sly smile returned once more. I heard you talking about the Hellhound. It's a shame the Bloodlust Alpha isn't coming, but at least we'll see what the big fuss is about with that Greyhound mutt. Just as Alpha Say was going to respond, the door pushed open, and a hush fell upon us. The Chancellor, Chancellor James Williams, came in. The elderly man held himself up with pride. When it came to respect, he was the one at the very top. Even Alpha Windrill acknowledged the man. Alphas, take a seat. Everyone shuffled to sit at their respective seating and stared at the Chancellor, who nodded toward the Lunas and Betas. Please. He nodded, a small, encouraging smile on his face. Everyone else sat at the back rows, having a good view of the round table. Like we had noticed, the seats at the Chancellor's right and left sides were empty. Neither the Bloodlust Alpha nor the Hellhound had arrived. The other seat that was meant for the Duskfall pack was empty, but no one said a word about it. After all, no one talks about a massacre that happened 4 years ago. For now, the Duskfall territory was put up for dispute. The neighboring packs were arguing about who had the right to claim it, and so the dispute was still ongoing. Nightwake was also close to the territory, but I decided against trying to claim it. I didn't need a reminder of where Celine had fallen. It would appear we're missing some people. The Chancellor noted, looking a little more amused than aggravated at the empty seats. Alpha Windrill seemed to have the opposite reaction. He scoffed, rolling his eyes as he sank back in his seat. He ranked third, which frustrated him beyond words could describe. After all, he was bested against a woman he held little regard about. The Bloodlust Alpha not appearing is old news, but see this? This is what happens when women are ranked. They get big-headed. The whore probably spread her legs to get to the top. The door slammed open, a new wave of power emitting from the source. Everyone's eyes snapped to the person standing at the doorway. Thick, heavy silence coating over everyone. I didn't turn to look, forcing my gaze to remain on the Chancellor as a means of respect, but no one else, other than Alpha Windrill's son, Cade, followed our example. Alpha Windrill himself looked awestruck, his gaze following the figure like a magnet. The clicking of heels resonated through the room, and it was enough to let me know she was here. The Hellhound was here. The Betas and Lunas sitting at the back were watching in awe as a woman, tall, blonde, and insanely beautiful, took her rightful seat at the Chancellor's left. She ignored the silence and heated gazes she carried with her and looked at the man she was accompanied with. I felt a pang of jealousy burn through me, my wolf growling but at the same time barking in excitement. What the hell was going on? I looked over to see Hestia and Beta Benicio's faces pale as a ghost, bodies frigid in tension. Seriously, what the fuck? Letting my curiosity get the better of me, I looked at the hellhound once more. Creamy skin, flawless of any blemishes, plump lips painted with dark red, eyes with long lashes hooding pale blue eyes, light blonde hair tied into a ponytail. I didn't even notice what she was wearing until now. She wore a black dress reaching her knees, her shoulders exposed and allowing every male here to see she was unmarked. Such a beauty was unmarked. I couldn't get rid of the feeling I knew her. It was possible I've seen her in the annual gala, but her scent was something I knew, something very familiar. There were only a handful of people I knew who had her characteristics, one of which was Hestia and the other was dead. "I'm glad to see you made it," the Chancellor said amusedly. Alpha Crestfield smiled, a small, humorless, snide smile. She leaned against her chair, hands on the table folded to show off her red-painted nails and her green greyhound crest ring. A ring I wore myself, except different as it was for Nightwake. "I was beginning to worry we'd have to start without you. I know you have a busy schedule," he continued, looking at the other alphas with a smile, never meaning to fade. His brown eyes fell to me and lingered before turning back to Alpha Crestfield. "Isn't that right, Celine?" Celine, when she was heading to the conference. The sound of my heels clicking against the marble floor echoed as we walked down the hallway. Each step I took held the aggravation I was feeling. Noah followed behind me, matching my emotions as he himself felt rather annoyed we were running late. Annoyingly enough, just as I was about to head out for the conference, one rogue was caught trying to survey around my territory. Of course, I made sure to oversee the capture myself. I wouldn't let any of my pack members deal with a rogue unsupervised. Rogues were vicious, untamed, and they surely would have no problem doing anything they could to get out of restraints. Isaac was the one I entrusted in keeping him locked up. Surely he was having fun with roughening him up a little. A smile graced my lips at the look on his face. The rogue was someone I didn't recognize, but I was certain he came from Xeneron's group. The little shit had his imprint on his arm. Striding to the conference room, I picked up a booming voice straining through the wooden door. "The Bloodlust Alpha not appearing is old news, but see this? This is what happens when women are ranked. They get big-headed. The whore probably spread her legs to get to the top." My eyebrows pressed together in anger before I slammed the door open, not caring that its hinges loosened. Immediately, my gaze fell onto the prick whose mouth was wide open and spouting all that nonsense. The man was thick with muscles, his power oozed off him like cologne, but it was more of a scare factor than it was reliable. Ignoring the piercing gazes from everyone in the room, I caught 3 familiar scents: Benicio, Hestia, and Landon. I nearly scowled at the mental images of their faces flashing in my mind. I refused to look at them. They didn't deserve the time. Disgust flowed through my body like a tidal wave. My wolf snarled, canines bared out as she paced around in my head out of outrage. As I trained my body, she trained with me. She was so much more than she was before. She had learned to control her emotions, which was hard for a wolf, to understand the situation a lot more closely and accept what our reality was. She finally understood the fact that our mate had been the one to abandon us, that he had rejected our existence and chosen to let us die. I held myself high. All 7 alphas were watching me with the intention of evaluating my capability, nothing less than I expected. Chancellor Williams sat at the center, watching with great interest as I made my way to his left side. The only other missing spots were that of the Duskfall pack and Alpha Locksworth. My eyes lingered at the seat Alpha Thompson would have taken, but tore my gaze away before I could feel any more than I already did. Pulling the chair back, I sat beside Chancellor Williams. "I'm glad to see you made it," he said. The lightness in his voice was clear. I plastered a smile on my face and leaned against the chair. My intertwined hands laid on the surface in front of me, showcasing my ring so that none of the alphas would question who I was. "I was beginning to worry we'd have to start without you. I know you have a busy schedule." His gaze swept through the table of alphas, landing on someone briefly before he parts his lips. Isn't that right, Celine? I felt my lips twitch. The old geezer was having fun with this. Well played, Williams, well played. I felt the 3 pairs of eyes burn into me, the one sitting a seat from me, prickling me the most. His power grew, but just barely. He had the same presence to him as he always did, the presence I desperately wanted in the past, but now lived to forget. I let out a small breath. Of course, which is why we should start this as quickly as we can. I won't waste your time, so let me get to the point. The rogues, I want them. Silence. Chancellor Williams was the first to break the tension. He laughed, his wise, crinkling eyes narrowing as he threw his head back. His body shook with laughter. Always so straight to the point, but I'm glad you want them. I was planning on having you handle them in first place. After all, he leaned toward the table, eyes going cold. All traces of his earlier playfulness gone, his hatred for rogues clear in his glassy dark eyes. When have you ever failed to break a rogue? My wolf shook her fur out at the compliment. She enjoyed the praise of the Chancellor and wagged her tail in appreciation. Dealing with rogues was a specialty of mine. I never did, I said simply. But you already know that. Chancellor Williams held my gaze as our smirks widened in silent understanding. The others in the room were visibly tense from our exchange. I guess I just confirmed their suspicions about me, including all the stories that reached them. Hold on. My eyebrows rose at the new voice interrupting. The same annoying voice that dared to question my value just moments before. You're gonna let her take the rogues? This woman? He gestured toward me with clear disgust. This heathen was getting on my nerves. My wolf was ready to issue a challenge, but I held her back. Insinuating a challenge right from the first meeting won't leave a good impression on the alphas I want an alliance with. Taking a deep breath in, I kept my lips tight and observed. Alpha Windrill, you must know of Alpha Crestfield's reputation. She's more than capable of handling these rogues. She's been in charge of interrogation for the past 2 years. This is no different. The Chancellor paused and glanced at everyone genially. I called forth this meeting to assure that everyone was in agreement of passing them over to Alpha Crestfield. Objections will be heard as long as it's in the space of questioning her capabilities. He rose a brow. So forgive me if I refuse to acknowledge your protest in regards to her gender. Alpha Windrill's expression darkened, his beady eyes turning black as he was shifting. Strands of brown fur started ripping through his skin. Immediately, the other alphas stood up, alert and ready to restrain him. Chancellor Williams and I were the only ones who stayed seated. You let this whore handle such an important task? Are you mad, Williams? Chancellor Williams growled, noting the disrespect from Alpha Windrill. I glared at the alpha, feeling my claws itching with need to sink them into his skin. We heard a faint growl surface from the corner of the room. My eyes drifted toward the source to see Noah shaking, his eyes flickering between black and green. His wolf was ready to go out in order to protect his alpha's honor. Alpha Windrill's black marble eyes laid on Noah, face scrutinizing the beta. He was ready to fight him for the disrespect. Drop your stance, pup. I'll put you down faster than you can even blink. He growled, taunting Noah into starting the fight. The last string of my restraint snapped. He no longer directed his attention to me, but to my beta, and that was something I wouldn't permit. Are you challenging me, Alpha Windrill? I asked, pure rage coursing through my veins from the threat underlying his tone against my beta. No one threatens my pack. No one. Alpha Windrill's gaze met mine, and a toothy grin inched across his face, the smugness radiating off him, almost making me choke on my desire to plummet him to death. I'm not challenging anyone, darling. I'm only stating facts. You aren't fit to stand with us. He opened his arms to refer to the male alphas sitting at our table. You should go ahead and let your mate take care of you. Actually, seeing as your neck isn't marked, you haven't met yours yet. He tiled his head to the side coyly. How about you come over to my pack? I'll take good care of you. You'd make a wonderful addition to my toys. His words unburied unwanted memories deep in my heart. The people who forced me into what I am now sitting just a few feet away from me. I grit down, turning my gaze to Chancellor Williams. Faking my composure, I laughed sardonically. I believe this is a challenge, Chancellor Williams. Am I wrong? Chancellor Williams shifted his gaze toward me, his shoulders tense from the irritation by the man stirring up all this trouble. He smiled tightly before nodding. No, I believe you're right. It would appear that Alpha Windrill is challenging your position. No matter how good his poker face was, I still could see through him. He was more than acceptive of what I was about to do. I've heard stories of this Alpha Windrill before. Unpleasant and infuriating stories, to be exact. Some came from Meredith, who personally had a bone to pick with the man. Supposedly, even then, when she was Alpha, he was more than vocal about his sexist beliefs. I looked over to the young man standing behind him. That must have been his son, Cade. The boy who was nothing like his father, or so Meredith says. Without thinking much of it, I rested my head on my propped arm and let my gaze burn through the arrogant Alpha in front. He was not going to escape me today. I'll do the world a favor and reduce the number of ignorant fools walking this earth by one. It's only right we go through with the challenge. My honor is being questioned. I have the right to defend myself. So before we continue our conversation, why don't we settle this like the Alphas we are? I smiled, daring him to object. I knew I baited him the moment his dark eyes narrowed into slits at my taunt. Alpha Windrill? The Alpha pierced his gaze at me and snarled. He probably didn't see the point in fighting because he was so convinced he would win. That only managed to fuel my desire to skin him alive in front of everyone so that no one else will so much as think about questioning my legitimacy. Standing, I stared straight at him. Chancellor Williams, I take it that you'll be our umpire? Chancellor Williams pushed his seat away and stood. He looked between Alpha Windrill and I before nodding. Fixing his suit jacket, he straightened up and pulled on his cuffs. Of course, Celine. Gentlemen, shall we take this outside? He asked the group of Alphas who looked more than curious as to what will happen. Quickly, everyone got up and started to head toward the exit. I walked behind the Chancellor with Alpha Windrill following close by. He emitted his energy, trying to make me submit only to have his efforts deflected. My apologies for losing my cool, Alpha. Noah linked. I glanced behind me to find him frowning. He felt like he was the reason this was happening. Don't apologize, Noah. This was bound to happen. The prick needs to get off his high horse and face reality. He has little regard about women. We don't need alphas like him leading a pack. Noah didn't respond, but I knew what I said made him feel better. I felt a tinge of relief wash over me from our bond. As an alpha, I had a bond with my beta and gamma. It was similar to a mate bond, but it was purely for business. It was to ensure that we all could work efficiently and compatibly with one another. Being connected would allow us to have a far more intimate understanding of how the other would think. Since the beta and gamma were chosen and not passed on through generations, there would be a need to affirm the individual's allegiance. There were different types of bonds, however. The bonds between the entire pack and the bonds between the alpha, beta, and gamma were different. As the three highest-ranking wolves, they needed to have separate links to ensure nothing would accidentally slip in the pack link. Think of it as a private channel only the three could access. To form a stable bond, you only needed to have a ceremony with a witch, but that bond didn't go deeper than communicative reasons. It didn't create as severe an allegiance, nor did it promise loyalty to each other. Many packs chose this bond mainly because many alphas wanted to separate themselves from being on equal standings with his gamma and beta. They believed it would bring them to a lower level than an alpha should. Foolish thinking, but a traditional belief. They doubted a traitor would ever climb to those rankings, so they never second-guessed it. It's what Nightwake believed in. To form the bond we did, Noah and Isaac had to take a blood oath with me, swearing their loyalty and life to the pack, in turn binding me to them. The blood oath wasn't something just anyone could do. The Chancellor was the only one who could perform it. Not to mention, to it hurt. It was held at a temple near the capital, one of the many temples built for the moon goddess. Roughly a week was taken when setting the bond. Snapping back to reality, we all walked down the hall and to the large yard outside the Capitol, flat ground of empty space welcoming us. This was the challenge grounds where alphas would challenge another alpha over the right of claiming land. The last challenge happened about a decade ago. The Bloodlust Alpha had everyone shaking to the core to even consider issuing out a challenge after witnessing his brutal wrath. You know how this works, alphas. Chancellor Williams boomed, clasping his hands together. He looked at the two of us. Everyone stood at the sideline when Alpha Windrill and I stood at the center of the field. All is fair on the challenge grounds. The victor shall take over the other's land, claiming the Alpha title. It is up to them to decide what to do with it. The defeated will lose all rights to his or her pack and will have automatically relinquished the title the moment they've been bested. There is not limit, no rules except that the two contestants cannot step out of the challenge grounds. Failing to do so will mean immediate loss. The entire time Chancellor Williams was speaking, Alpha Windrill was staring at me, the cocky, overconfident expression on his face never leaving as he stripped off his shirt. I kept myself calm, showing him how his attempt to display his power had no effect on me. If he thought he could intimidate me with a showcase of his muscles, then he's underestimating the threat of rogues. I've seen and dealt with rogues far stronger in terms of will. Rogues don't care if the opponent is alpha or insanely strong, they'll still fight. They'll observe and assess the opponent, but they'll never run away. It was always a fight to the death with them. I'll have fun making you submit to me. Once I take over your land and your people, I'll earn my rightful place back. I'll have more women for my fill. And you, darling Alpha, will find yourself in a new position. He walked forward, purposely taking dignified steps to emphasize his power. He walked closer and closer until he was only an inch away. His tall structure loomed over me as he smirked. Then, without hesitating, I pierced my claws into his chest and ripped out his spine. Blood splutters out of him as his eyes rolled to the back of his skull, his last breath leaving him with his body hunching limp in my hold. I dropped his body to the ground and walked away when it pooled around him. Blood stained my dress and soaked my hand, but I didn't mind. Blood spammed into the crevices of my ring. The dark red drilling around the green stone made me frown. Had it been 4 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to stomach the sight of this. I learned to embrace the blood I grew accustomed to seeing and drawing out, but it didn't mean I liked it. But I'll make the exception for today. It was rather personal. Now, I said when I reached the group of alphas. Chancellor Williams was smiling wide, eyes lit with amusement. He hated Alpha Windrill as much as anyone could, but he couldn't kick him out of the alpha's seat. That was a power no one had unless a challenger had come across. Meredith couldn't risk challenging him when she had no heir in line to succeed her then. Then she found me. Let's get back into the conference room, shall we? I turned to the direction of the Capitol only to stop when I heard a chuckle. No, I don't think there's a need, Celine. I looked at Chancellor Williams with a quizzical brow lifted. His eyes scanned the group of alphas once, before turning back to look at me. I don't believe there's anyone else who would disagree with letting you handle the rogues. I'd already wished for you to handle it, but needed all the alphas to agree. The conference was opportunity for those who had an objection to let it be known, but we do have to discuss what you want to do with Windrill's pack, Evergreen. I exhaled. I almost forgot about that. I let my head crane to the group of huddled betas and lunas before landing my eyes on Cade. He met me in the eyes, not flinching away or staring at me in hatred. I motioned to him with my head. I don't want it. Give it to the boy. It was rightfully his anyway. Walking off to where Noah stood with a handkerchief in his hand, I took it gratefully and wiped the blood smudged on my face and hands. Shall I send someone to collect the rogues? I asked Chancellor Williams. He shook his head and grinned. No, I'll have someone send them over to you. He paused, smirking as he shot me a look of question. Will I be seeing you at the gala next week? Walking with Noah trailing behind me, I raised my hand dismissively. You can count on it. Landon's POV. I watched as Celine walked away with the beta following after her. To say she had left me speechless was an understatement. She left everyone gaping after her disappearing figure. May this be a lesson to all of you. I turned to look at Chancellor Williams, who too was looking after Celine's silhouette. Don't mistake her disinterest in gaining more power as weakness. It'll do you well to remember that, unless, of course, you want to end up like him, he said, pointedly looking at the spineless man laying on the ground. Literally, without another word, the Chancellor turned around with his hands behind his back and walked away. You're all dismissed. The tension immediately lifted when the Chancellor and Celine left. I felt my wolf howl in pride, seeing firsthand how capable and strong his mate was. While I, on the other hand, was completely and utterly in shock. Beta Benicio quickly ran over to me with Hestia right behind him. Was that Celine? Our Celine? He asked, clearly bothered. I nodded once, my gaze glued to the ground. Then something came over me, something that urged me to follow her. So I did. I ran down the field, following her scent that was almost completely different from the one I remembered, but somehow wholeheartedly the same. I heard the other alphas speak among themselves about what was going on, but I ignored them. Beta Benicio was hot on my trail, but I was still faster. Finally, I caught sight of her. She was stepping inside her car, surrounded by 2 vans filled with warriors. The man she was with spoke quietly to her in hushed tones. I stopped in my step and waited for her to notice me. She froze, sniffing the air with a confused expression on her face before lifting her gorgeous blue eyes to meet my green ones. Her expression remained the same, neither happy nor sad to see me, neutral. Celine, I began, slowly beginning to make my way toward her. The man by her side immediately took a stance, aggression rolling off him in waves when Celine lifted her hand up. As soon as she did, the tension had diffused, and the man who was so close to lunging at me obediently stepped aside. Alpha Walker, she said in a smooth, strong voice, a voice suited for a Luna's. A wave of disappointment washed over me as I heard her address me with my title. Not only that, but with my last name. She was indirectly telling me she didn't consider us any more than acquaintances. I shouldn't be surprised, but we were mates. Didn't that count for something? WH, how did you? Where were you? How are you? At this, she rose a brow. She was completely unamused, almost dreading my presence for the mere fact she would rather do anything else than be here with me. All the questions and things I wanted to ask and say to her blanked out of me when I soaked her in. She truly was beautiful. She had gotten toned. Her form was much better than before, allowing me to see what good 4 years of training had done for her. A huge part of me was glad to see she didn't take anyone else. The missing mark on her neck told me so. But there was still a possibility that she was seeing someone. A possibility I didn't want to consider. Alpha Walker, if you have any business with me, please make an appointment. I don't have time for small talk and pointless little reunions. Then, without even blinking, she pulled the car door shut and waited for the man to climb in with her before driving off. The vans followed suit, leaving behind a fog of dust to blur my vision. I watched her drive away for the second time in my life, but somehow it felt like I lost something I didn't have. Well, that was quite a show. I didn't look away from the road to know that Noah had an annoyingly smug expression on his face. I could feel his excitement and pride swelling through our bond. He made damn sure I knew how good he was feeling, how much he enjoyed what he witnessed, the overwhelming satisfaction he got from the little show. The way his voice was slightly higher and pressed than usual was also a dead giveaway. He claimed to have a love for drama. My favorite part was, please make an appointment, but then again, the whole thing was great. There's so much to choose from. He sighed in content before looking at me seriously. I'm afraid I'm falling hard for you, Alpha. Don't tell Malia. It could be our little secret. The urge to smile was getting harder to resist, so I didn't. My lips tugged up and I shook my head in amusement. I made a mental note to tattle on him so he could face the wrath of his mate. Goddess knows he'd rather face any punishment I'd give him than be given the silent treatment by his beloved destined. Gripping the wheel in my hands, I glanced over to him. Noah had been talking about this for the last 30 minutes of our drive home. He made me feel like a celebrity with the latest scandal from the way he was talking. Like Ike just had a mini cat fight with some girl and ended on the front cover of tabloid magazines. Except in this case, a dog fight. Taking a left turn, we entered pack territory and nodded at the warriors guarding the border. From a glance, I saw our best fighters aside from Isaac, watching with caution as we approached. Eyes narrowed in alert and bodies tense in caution. The head warrior lurched forward, ready to jump down in front of the car when his gaze met mine. He backed off immediately but said nothing. He waited for his comrades to take notice themselves. When they caught scent of who we were, they relaxed, black eyes swirling back to their original shades. They bowed in recognition before pulling the metal gates open. "Welcome back, Alpha," Beta Noah. Noah linked back, "Keep your eyes open." Driving into the lot, I felt relieved to see nothing had changed. It was always like this whenever I left pack territory. A small part of me was always afraid that when I came back, everything would be set into flames. Lives would have ended, bodies laying around in a puddle of their own blood, families torn apart, and children knowing nothing of the horrors that await them. Absolutely anything could happen at any given second. I learned that the hard way with the attack at Duskfall. I was certain I wouldn't be able to get back up again if I had to witness the same thing happen twice. Not when I was the sole person in charge of protecting them. Once I parked the car, I unbuckled my seatbelt to find Noah's eyes flashing blank. He remained completely still for a few seconds before his eyes returned to its usual vibrant green. His posture stiffened, expression wiped clean of any lightheartedness. Chancellor Williams sent a memo. "There has been a change of plans. The two rogues are staying at the Capitol. He wants you to conduct the interrogations there. Zeneron has been keeping a number of rogues around the territory. Reports say they've found some lurking near the woods. The Chancellor doesn't want to risk the chances of the two escaping by bringing them out." A frown inscribed itself on my face. I knew things were a little suspicious. Zeneron wasn't going to give them up that easily. Theo and Val knew far too much to simply be discarded like used tissues. They had bigger roles than just being his henchmen carrying out orders. They probably had a good amount of knowledge for future plans and campsites. Zeneron knew, only too well, the risks he'd have if they decide to talk, which made the rogues all the more important. Knowing Chancellor Williams, he'll make sure the possibility of escape is zero before giving up our valuable subjects. I had no plans to argue with that. As much as I wanted to tear them limb from limb in my territory and away from prying eyes, I wasn't desperate enough to put their use in jeopardy by demanding them here. Still, they wouldn't escape my clutches. Just because they couldn't be brought here didn't mean I'd make the interrogation a walk in the park. Just because I couldn't bring them didn't mean I couldn't bring things to them. I had a few select tools in mind. I hummed, already pinning for a chance to face those two again. My wolf sat on her hind legs, jaw parted with her tongue sticking out in anticipation. The thirst for their blood only grew the longer the days went by. Not once did we forget our desire to pay them back. The desire to make them regret their decision of attacking Duskfall. Everything they were responsible for would be paid in full. One way or another, their blood will be spilt. It was just a matter of time. "That's okay. Prepare our little toys." I opened the car door, sliding off the seat, and planted my feet firmly into the ground. Some pups that were running around took notice of me and clumsily bowed in respect before running off. I smiled, watching over the pups squealing and laughing with one another, little bodies bouncing in glee as they shrieked. They lived such carefree lives I strived to protect, the life I had wanted to give Lyra. One pup hadn't moved from his spot. He kept staring at me, or rather, my body. When he noticed I caught him looking, he gasped before speeding off to where his friends were. I frowned. Glancing down, I realized the pup was staring at my blood-soaked dress. It made me wonder how he noticed when the red wasn't easily seen on black fabric. He must have caught scent of it. Noah repeated my motion, closing his door shut, and was about to carry out my orders when he looked at me. Giving me a sympathetic smile which told me he felt my thoughts of Lyra, He started walking off in the direction of the pack house. "Oh, and Noah? Bring Silver." I remembered their faces perfectly, Theo and Val, two rogues responsible for what happened at Duskfall. I remembered Theo's smug face. I remembered the fear I felt running away from them with Lyra trembling in my arms, fear for her, fear that they'd mercilessly put an end to her life. Fear that had turned out to be the most harshest reality. My eyes darkened with bloodlust as Noah smirked at what was to come. The bond sent waves of anger to him. "How much silver?" he asked, knowing full well what I was going to say. But to his amusement, I answered without skipping a beat. "Lots of it." "Congrats, Celine." I raised my head from the papers I was looking at to see a smiling Isaac leaning against the doorframe. His sleeved arms crossing his chest enhanced the muscles tightly bound by his shirt. I shot him a questioning look as I pulled away from the desk. Since getting back to the pack house, I've done nothing but paperwork. I sat here chained to my desk, looking through countless reports and admission requests. At this rate, I'm going to need reading glasses very soon. "Congrats?" I asked him. I'm sure Isaac had just finished training the youths of the pack. As Gamma, Isaac was responsible for leading our warriors as well as training pack members. I'd come and overlook training occasionally, but he preferred to do it alone. He always preferred to work alone. It was hard enough for others to really get close to him outside training, as I've seen countless female wolves try, but training with him was difficult. I guess being close to Bentley and all was the reason he took to me easily. 5 months was how much time it took for Noah to even hold a proper conversation with Isaac. I had to give it to him, though. Noah did not back down and relentlessly tried to get on Isaac's good side. I guess his persistence was really the key factor of their friendship. Isaac was a tough one to crack. I'm sure everyone in the pack can vouch for that. He pushed himself off the frame with a goofy grin on his face. He strode over to me, planting his hands on the table and leaned forward. "Everyone's heard about Windrill. Noah's been running his mouth telling everyone how the hellhound was unleashed since he got here. Handsters, sound effects and all. Quite the storyteller, that guy, but I doubt he exaggerated anything." He motioned with his hands for emphasis. I groaned, rubbing my temples with my thumb and forefinger. While my wolf was prancing around in pride, I was dreading reality. Of course, Noah just had to. I can almost hear the pups running down pack territory, singing a song about it. "Remind me why I chose Noah as my beta again," I grumbled, flipping through the stacks of unsigned papers. Report. Report. Admission. Report. Admission. 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 My fingers ached to rip my hair out, but I held myself back. I was this close to throwing the stacks in the fireplace, but that would have been stupid. Satisfying, yes, but stupid. Isaac pulled away, a smile stretching as he shrugged. His dark hair hung over his eyes with his lips slowly tugging into a smirk. "Can't answer that when I'm still questioning why myself." I rolled my eyes, intertwining my fingers together, and sank against my leather chair. Looking at Isaac with suspicion, I stared. I knew there had to be some reason Isaac was here. It was completely out of character for him to walk into my office just for small talk. If he wasn't training, he was overseeing others train. There wasn't a single second in his life where he wasn't on pack training grounds. Okay, what's going on now? The smile slipped off his face at being caught. Isaac's gaze dropped to the floor before he sheepishly chuckled. "That obvious, huh?" He may have a good poker face, but it didn't work on me. He sighed, his body sagging forward as he looked behind him to where the closed door was. He glared. "Alpha Windrill is here to see you." His words were more than just a simple shock. I felt my eyes widen. The boy whose dad I just murdered like an hour and a half ago? "His son? Cade?" I asked. "Yes." "The man went out of his way to come here instead of going home?" I stood up, pushing my chair back, and walked around my mahogany table. I sat at the ledge of the table and pursed my lips. "And?" He said nothing. Isaac's Adam's apple bobbed slowly as he swallowed down his nerves. His eyes immediately took refuge at the ground. His fists were clenched and his jaw was tightened. The papers would have to wait. "It appears to me that my Gamma here is worried about something. And I think you should send him away." Again, my eyes widened in shock. "Now why would I do that?" Isaac's head suddenly snapped up, his eyes wide with disbelief. Ripples of emotions flowed through my veins from our bond. Shaking his head, he looked at me like I was missing the big point here. You just killed his father? He may want revenge? There's a chance he could very well attack you right here, right now. I don't trust any Windrill blood, and I most certainly won't trust him with you involved. I don't understand why you let him have the position in the first place. Windrills are no good. His deep voice rumbled. The anxiety and distrust was obvious in his tone. I could feel his wolf perk up in caution, walking around in a circle and glancing at the door every once in a while. While human side, Isaac was wary of the boy, so was Wolf Isaac. Together, they were just a lump of a paranoid warrior. I exhaled, giving him a look. Of course I knew where he was coming from. He did have point. Typically, any person whose parent was killed by someone would feel angry. Maybe angry enough to want to take revenge by attacking the killer. But that doesn't apply to this situation. Not when his father has made his mother the rightful Luna, one of his many playthings. I may not be the most benevolent person there was, but I knew no one would be able to forgive a father who would do such a thing. Besides, I highly doubt the boy would try to kill me when he was in my territory. I refused to believe he was stupid enough to do that. With no child or siblings, Cade Windrill is the sole heir to the Alpha's seat. If he dies, the pack will go into complete chaos with who will have the right to claim it, and the rest is history. The fact that there's no current Beta, Luna, or Gamma means there's no one else suitable for the title. No order in the pack. The rightful Luna wouldn't be able to claim the title because she was never given one in the first place, nor did she have any prior training to be able to fight off challengers, at least that I know of. It'll be fair game to anyone in the pack, but it's inevitably going to fall. With no alpha blood in the seat, the alpha will crumble from pressure and will lead the pack to its demise. An alpha with no alpha blood or connection to an alpha blood, as a mate, is the same thing as a bunny going against a pack of lions. He'll be eaten alive, metaphorically speaking. I wasn't going to cower away just because there's a slim chance he would attack me. If he did, in fact, actually have the balls to try attacking me on my territory, I wouldn't hesitate to end him the same way I did his father. Maybe almost as brutally, just to emphasize how I'm not a very kind person if you test me. I'm giving the boy the benefit of the doubt and trusting my intuition that he is nothing like his father. I trust paper and statistics, but when dealing with people you never really know. You gamble in the game of trust. Alpha Windrill is not going to do harm. I genuinely believe he's a good man, perhaps one of the best alphas in the future. Isaac opened his mouth to protest, but I cut him off. I won't turn him away because of chance, Isaac. My voice dripped with conviction. Allowing small waves of my dominance to seep through, Isaac stiffened. After a brief minute, he nodded, but I could see his strong disagreement etching on his face. He looked down, eyebrows tight in frustration, and thinned his lips together. He was stubborn, sulking at the decision I made. I sighed and raked my fingers through my hair. I'd like to see what he wants first. If it makes you feel any better, you are more than welcome to stay close. Granted, you aren't allowed to be in the same room out of respect for the Alpha, but if anything he does makes you feel any bit suspicious of him, you can intervene. I trust you, Isaac. Now I need you to trust in my judgment. Finally, Isaac relented. He nodded in defeat before glaring down at the door. Okay, fine. But if the kid does anything I don't like, I'll beat his ass. The seriousness in his tone was almost endearing. I laughed, pushing myself off the edge. I placed a hand over his shoulder and smiled. Yes, my Gamma is quite a strong warrior. At this, he brightened. With a cocky grin plastered on his face, he dismissively scoffed. I'm glad you understand. I believe you're missing handsome young strapping lad, but I'll let it go. You're one very lucky alpha. With one last smile, Isaac headed toward the door to get Alpha Windrill. I waited patiently, allowing myself to sit back down while putting away my all-important documents starting to haunt me in my dreams. I know for a fact Noah will not be happy with the extra paperwork being pushed aside. He would undoubtedly get a share from me later today. I heard a knock followed by Isaac's deep voice. Alpha Celine, Alpha Windrel is here to see you. I breathed in, making sure to erase any lingering expression on my face. Although I was confident in my judgment over Cade, I would never let my guard down. I didn't need to give him an opportunity to strike me just because I believed in the guy. Trust is a very fragile thing that could easily be manipulated. It's up to the person who believed to have a backup plan when things turn out for the worse, when they end up being wrong. Come in. The door creaked open with Isaac leading him in. My eyes swept down his body. Now that he was closer, I could see the slight muscles he had built up, the strong presence he gave, and most importantly, the dark, unwavering eyes he had. The eyes that refused to yield. It was definitely the aura he was giving out. Strong, dignified, respectable. Everything I didn't sense from Windrel. Standing up, I reached out to him to shake his hand as a sign of my respect. He quickly grasped it, giving my hand a firm squeeze before pulling away. If I was being honest, I felt a little awkward. I was staring at the son whose father I killed just moments before. Thankfully, he didn't seem to have any motive of murdering me, so it eased my nerves just a little. Isaac gave me one last glance before making a swift turn for the door and closing it shut. Alpha Crestfield. Cade's eyes held no malice. I couldn't feel the faintest thirst for blood on his end. If anything, he was completely relaxed in my presence, if not feeling slightly out of place. Now that I thought about it, it was weird Cade got in without me knowing. No one was permitted to enter pack territory without my permission. Miss Meredith Crestfield allowed me entrance. Cade said suddenly. She, seemed quite welcoming. He answered as if sensing my question. I sighed, in annoyance. Something told me she most likely assumed he was a suitor, or better yet, my boyfriend. Meredith was probably thanking the moon goddess by now for my behalf. I see. I breathed out with a pressed laugh. Well, I'd say I was expecting your visit, but I'd be lying if I did. So what can I do for you, Alpha Windrel? I asked. Cade rubbed the back of his neck stiffly. He shuffled around on his feet before raising his eyes to meet mine. He looked very wary. Not in the I don't trust you way, but the I'm about to say something you might not like way. I would actually prefer it if you'd call me by my mother's last name, Woods. I'd rather not be associated to that sperm donor. You could also just call me Cade. It doesn't really make much of a difference to me. But please, anything but Windrel. I already knew I was going to like this guy. Well, okay then, Alpha Woods, is there anything you need? Cade frowned. Sighing, he slumped his shoulders back. His wolf was a large one. Large but a bit lanky. He had all the qualities of an alpha, save for the proper training. He needed to fill out more. The only exceptional part of him right now was the way he carried himself. It's the way he announced his dominance, unexpected and uncontrolled. Sometimes he let it out at full force. Other times he'd let it dwindle. In the conference room just hours before, I barely felt it until his father said he submitted to me. His anger was so vast, his dominance poured out of him from every inch. Everyone was too focused on the bickering to notice, but surely I did. Yes, but first I wanted to thank you. Thank me? Oh no, the title is rightfully yours. It wouldn't have been right if I took it. I quickly explain. I didn't really want to tell him that I also thought it was too much work. Managing 2 packs or merging 2 packs would be overkill with paperwork. Noah was praying to the goddess for a swift, easy death when he realized I was technically alpha for Evergreen until I passed the right to Cade. The mere fact gave him a breather. No, not that. Well, yes, that, but... He ran a hand down his face in frustration with himself. Thank you for killing him, he mumbled. Windrel was not exactly Father of the Year, nor was he really Maid of the Year, but I'm sure everyone knows that. I've wanted to challenge him for the title for so long already, but I couldn't. He had my mate, held her in one of our dungeons underground. He threatened to make her into one of his girls and kill her if I tried to take it from him. He threatened the same with Mom, except he said he'd allow his men to have fun with her, to take turns. He never cared. Not once. Not ever. Cade's eyes were downcast. I could see that there was still a small part of him that wished his father had cared. Or maybe he was just wondering why he didn't. Why he was like that. Why he didn't care for his son. why he was so greedy for power. Windrill was not a good man. Anyone with eyes could see that, but I underestimated just how bad he was. I knew he was a pig since the first word I heard come from his mouth. I just didn't think he could be that heartless toward his own offspring. I would have thought his paternal instincts kicked in, but I guess it was different for him. He threatened his own son with his mate. That went beyond being a shit father. So thank you. You really saved us. And I know this is going to be completely selfish on my part, but please, I beg you. Cade suddenly bows, body frigid and hands tight at his sides. His wolf was doing the same, ears flattened down and tail low between his legs. His 2 front legs bent over so that his back tilted down with his legs holding him up. Please help train us. Our pack has no experience in combat. Windrill never allowed us to train because he feared someone will challenge him. We're completely vulnerable. The alphas in that conference room know we're inexperienced. Without a doubt, they'll try to challenge me. I want to change the pack. I want to fix that man's mistake. As much as I hate him, I still have his blood running through my veins. Please, please help us. Cade kept his head bowed, waiting for my response. What do I say in this situation? There were so many disadvantages that outshines the gains I could get from this. If there was any gains at all. Training his pack meant giving up my resources. It meant sending my men over to his pack instead of keeping them here to protect us. Trusting him too quickly can backfire and lead me to lose some pack members. If what Isaac said was right about him being like Windrill, he could very well be plotting something against me. But did I have the guts to turn my back on him? Could I possibly abandon someone in need of help when all I ever wanted was help in the past? Abandoning him and his pack was like abandoning Duskfall and Lyra. I stared at him, catching similarities between him and I. The drive to protect something, someone. The similar drive of needing strength but different circumstances bringing it up. For me, vengeance. For him, reconstruction. I remained silent, still soaked in my thoughts. Cade must have assumed that was my answer because he swallowed harshly. The disappointment he tried to conceal slipped through his mask of indifference, his face looking solemn as he straightened his back. He tried to laugh it off, but it sounded too forced. I understand if you don't want to do it. You've already done so much for us. I'll think about it. Cade's lips parted. Immediately his face beamed when he realized what I said. He smiled, an ear-splitting smile that stretched miles across his face. The wolf in him wagged its tail, eyes shining with hope and excitement. Sucking in a breath, he looked at the ground before meeting my gaze brightly. Thank you. Thank you. Not long after, Cade left. I watched him get in his car and drive off my territory through the office window. The boy didn't even bring his own guards. Then again, did they even have properly trained guards back at his territory? I sighed, walking away from the window and sat down on my chair. I screwed eyes shut in exhaustion. Why'd you say you'd think about it when you know you'll do it anyway? I kept my eyes shut, but breathed out. Why are you planning on asking me to train them if you don't trust any Windrill blood? I opened one eye to look at Isaac. He stood there, leaning on his left foot with a slight grin on his face. He shrugged and pursed his lips. What can I say? I have a soft spot for tragic backstories. I cocked a brow. I call bullshit. Really? I asked, drawling out the why incredulously. Isaac and I stared at each other for a few seconds before he gave in. Shoving his hands in his jean pockets, he kicked at the ground, mumbling, Okay, fine. I know Alpha Oliver would have wanted me to. You know what he's like with these things. He hates leaving vulnerable people behind. People like Lyra. He paused, warily looking up at me before quickly darting away. I kept my face blank, even when my heart slightly tightened at the name. The sore subject still difficult for me to talk, hear, or even think about being the cause. He hates the idea of abandoning someone in need. Isaac gave me a lopsided smile. Just like you do, I just kept staring at him. I knew deep down inside I would have agreed anyway. I just used the ideas of disadvantages to try to convince myself I wouldn't. At first, I wasn't sure who I'd send, but seeing as Isaac was more than willing to do it, I believe I found my person. With a nod, I conceded to the idea. I pulled open the drawer and took out a single-pack transfer sheet. Isaac's attention fell to the paper I slid across the desk toward him. Handing him a pen, I gave him a hard look. If Cade wanted help with training, then I'd have to send the best I had. You leave tomorrow. Isaac prepared his luggages that very same minute. He decided on only bringing 2 sets with the idea of getting more at their territory. That night, I had a hard time sleeping. Worry and anxiety crept up inside me, but I blocked our bond so he wouldn't notice. I knew if he felt the tiniest bit of hesitance on my part, he would revoke his offer and sit his ass right here. I didn't need him changing his mind because of my needless worrying. So with only a few hours of sleep on my body, morning came quickly, and it was time to part with him. If anything is wrong, and I mean anything, please call me back. Don't try to handle everything yourself. I may have promised to train them until I saw fit, but I'm your gamma. I won't hesitate to turn tail and run my way back home if you do. Pride be damned. My loyalty lies with you, not with them. Our blood oath is evidence of that. I gave Isaac a reassuring smile before grabbing hold of his neck and nuzzling our foreheads together. Doing this was an intimate thing between close companions. Whether it be lovers, friends, siblings, comrades, it was a meaningful gesture. It showed complete trust, affection, and how valuable the relationship between the 2 wolves were. It was a good indicator of familiarity. You worry yourself more than I worry for you, Isaac. I'll be fine. Take care of those wolves. They'll need all the guidance they can get. With one last nuzzle, I let Isaac pull away and watched as he got in the van. Cade was more than ecstatic to hear that I was sending my gamma, of all people, to train them. Ideally, the training sessions would only last a few months, 6 at most. But that's only if he manages to teach them the basic understanding of combat. I remained rooted to my spot, thinking of Bentley and how much prouder he would have been to see how far Isaac has grown. Of all his accomplishments, I was there to see it. His passing the gamma training, his first gamma challenge, taking the oath, taking the blood oath, everything. I could almost see Bentley's face melting into that warm smile that made his bluish-green eyes sparkle even brighter. The same smile he gave Lyra when he'd see her talking animatedly about anything and everything. The kind of smile a father would give his child for simply breathing. Alpha Selene, we've just received a message from the Nightwake Pack. Alpha Walker has requested an audience with you at his territory today. My eyebrows raised at this. I couldn't help but let out a small laugh. He wanted to see me? I didn't think he'd quite literally take my words and set up an appointment. Then again, if it wasn't a formal invitation, there'd be no way I was accepting it. Noah looked at me quietly with the sensation of unease releasing out from our bond. He knew my history with Landon and my family. Once we formed the blood oath, we formed somewhat of a soul connection. Everything I went through, he knew. Everything he went through, I knew. The same thing with Isaac. I knew his history as he knew mine. He felt like it wasn't a good idea. A million things could go wrong by attending this meeting. Fights could break out, tempers could be lost, screaming, yelling, crying. I shuddered. I was certain if Isaac was here, he'd feel the same way. But sadly, I wouldn't be listening to their request had they asked me not to go. Denying the request was like running away. Landon would know I was purposely avoiding him if I decided to refuse the meeting. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of thinking he still had an effect on me. Granted, the mate bond was still there, but it was mostly just a slight pinch. The anger and fury residing inside me overpowers that small speck of emotion. That was one thing I didn't understand. Wolves were instinctual. They were batshit crazy for their mate. Yet mine understood and adapted to the situation far more easily than any wolf should. It's like she knew from the start something would happen and only ever acted out when he was mated and marked. Other than that, her reaction to everything else was minimal compared to how other wolves would have handled it. Sure, she had been initially possessive over Landon, but she wasn't forcing me to act out in order to obtain him. Some wolves would lash out if their mate so much as looked at another a second too long. Mine never really did. Shaking my head, I forced myself to stop thinking about it. I should be glad I was blessed with an independent wolf who wasn't stuck on a man who didn't want us. That's another reason why agreeing to this meeting wasn't all that hard either. I didn't have to pretend like I didn't care about him and Hestia, because honestly, I don't. I stopped caring the moment I laid there on the ground, doubling over in pain as Lyra stared at me with those pretty little eyes slowly closing shut. The only emotion that overwhelms me is rage over their betrayal. The fact that they were willing to let me die. The fact that they let so many others die. There will always be that underlying tension that connects us, but other than that, they can do whatever they'd like with each other. As long as they leave me out of it, I wouldn't dare act like a coward. Besides, this'll be good publicity. It's about time I start forming alliances with select packs. Now that my debut was out in the open, I was surely getting more eyes on me now. Just this morning, I had a few requests for alliance formation form abroad. Some will try to kiss up to me, while others will scheme. I'll be prepared for both. Obviously, Nightwake is not part of that bunch, I was considering. How could I ever consider people who don't try to aid alliances when they need help? How could I ever consider people who don't honor their word? I'll never forget what they did to me. To Duskfall. To Lyra. But by my going there, it would look like I, at the very least, considered it. People won't be able to say shit if I actually accept the invitation. Their decision of ignoring warnings and refusing to aid a documented ally was treachery and punishable by law. At the same time, why were the rogues giving Nightwake warnings? Why threaten them by destroying other packs? What was their goal, their motive? I had these infuriating questions swirl in my mind for years. If I had been an officially inducted member in Duskfall, I could have brought my case to court. The fact I reached out for help and was denied could have been incriminating. As it was, at the time of the attack, I was only a temporary transfer. I had no grounds to claim a breach in the treaty. I could plea my case, telling them I heard rogues speaking about their treachery, but what evidence did I have? My word? That wouldn't be enough. Their denial of my attempt to communicate with them won't do much either. They could just as easily claim that they didn't know why I was reaching out at the time and use the excuse that we were on bad terms and simply didn't want to speak with me. Either way, there was no way around it. To implicate them, I needed cold hard proof. Admission from the rogues in question. I've tried getting as much intel as I could beforehand, but I could only do so much at a distance. I didn't have any connection to Nightwake or the rogues. No one would believe the word of one person, no matter the person being an alpha. In fact, people would be much more suspicious because I'm an alpha and the ex-mate of the current alpha I'm blaming for the incident. There's too much at stake for me to go barging in and pointing fingers without evidence. I may be angry, but I wasn't foolish. In total, 4 people know of what I heard. Meredith, Noah, Isaac, and Chancellor Williams. We laid low, secretly trying to piece together clues while I strive further down in my path. That's why the 2 rogues are that much more important. That's why I need them locked up and away from the danger of escaping. They were the 2 rogues who indirectly told me about their connection to Nightwake. I've had several guesses about what it could be. I've thought about more land, seeing as Nightwake and Duskfall were neighbors, but Alpha Walker had long before backed out of the dispute. I've even considered underlying hatred or revenge, but then why would the rogues think it was a good idea to use Duskfall if Nightwake hated them or sought after revenge? Could it be that the rogues are the ones with the bitterness? Then again, they would have attacked Duskfall without any warnings in the first place. Instead, they used Duskfall as leverage against Nightwake. Could it be that Nightwake has something Zeneron wants? Thinking more and more about this, Walker's invitation was only getting more appealing. I could use this to my advantage, scope out anything I could find, and just maybe come home with answers, possibly hear things while my visit there. Whatever the rogues want, Nightwake has. Once I find out what exactly that is, I'll gather the evidence I need and file for a case against Nightwake. Pursing my lips together, I nodded to myself before turning on my heels and walking into the pack house. If I was going to visit a pack, I would of course have to dress for the occasion. Noah followed a few steps behind, waiting patiently for what I would say next. "Get the van ready. We're leaving now." "Yes, Alpha." The van door slid open with my warriors piling out in a single line. They stood firm and unwavering, glaring down at anyone throwing looks our way. We were beginning to attract attention. A lot of it. I swung my legs over the car seat, letting my feet sink into Nightwake territory. It was still the same. Vast land surrounded by smaller houses and a huge house meant for the Alpha right in the middle, with a huge field in the far side of the territory. The simple, modern buildings identical to the ones I could salvage through my memories. It hardly changed. A few bystanders took the time to stop whatever they were doing to stare, some actively trying to find out where the Alpha was or who we were. Our unfamiliar scents traveled far and wide, seeing as a few people stuck their heads out the window to investigate. I could feel their suspicions projected onto us from their gazes. Wolves didn't like non-pack to be on their territory. They felt threatened, if not extremely intimidated. I was certain Landon kept our visit to himself rather than letting his pack members know. They looked completely confused and a little hostile from our arrival. Most of these people were the ones who grew up with me, knowing only my name and my sister. People who never treated me bad but instead acted like I didn't exist. It was bad enough. The place gave me unwanted memories. But now it's trying to suck me back in the past? Breathing in the scent I was so familiar with, but soon grew stranger to, a sense of nostalgia came over me. Snippets of seeing myself walk down the path from school all alone lingered in my mind. The garden I used to tend to, probably forgotten about, and withered away. Noah stood by my side, standing tall and looking sharp with a suit he only wore when visiting outside packs. He looked over the area, no doubt noting the layout. It was his first time setting foot on Nightwake. "Excuse me, can we help you?" My gaze drifted to a small petite woman holding onto an infant of about 6 months old. She watched us curiously, bright tawny eyes squinting with intrigue. Noah immediately stepped forward, nodding at her before gesturing to me. My Alpha Celine Crestfield of Greyhound Territory was invited by Alpha Walker for a meeting. We were told to come here today, but I see that no one is really expecting us. There was slight irritation in Noah's voice. When an Alpha visits another pack, it's common courtesy for the Alpha of the territory to receive their guests personally, often making a big deal of it by having a welcoming feast. It established respect on his counterpart and demonstrates goodwill toward the visitor. Goodwill, my ass. The only good Landon can ever do is to stay the hell out of my way. Just before the girl could respond, we noticed someone pushing through the crowd. I knew from the scent of him who it was. I kept my head high and watched as Benicio managed to squeeze through the bodies of nosy spectators. He was breathing hard as he fought to catch his breath. Once his gaze settled on Noah and I, he straightened up. Clearing his throat, he looked me dead in the eyes. "Scylla Alpha Crestfield, our apologies for the lack of hospitality. We weren't aware you'd arrive this early. Again, forgive us. Alpha Landon is now expecting you at his office." I gave him a curt nod. Nothing more, nothing less. My wolf huffed out, tail swishing back and forth dismissively at the lack of welcome. Her sour mood was already beginning to affect mine. Following the beta down the road, whispers passed through the crowd. Some had recognized my individual scent, realizing who I was with Benicio's initial slip-up of familiarity. "Isn't that Luna Hestia's sister? Didn't she die? Wasn't she at Duskfall? How is she an Alpha? She doesn't have Alpha blood in her. Look at her neck. Seems like she's a soul Alpha. No mate. Crestfield? You mean to tell me she changed her name? Traitor. She's just power-hungry." I threw a glare at the gutsy brunette standing by the sidelines. She immediately cowered away when she felt my gaze, submissively looking down with her body as stiff as a board. Her friends surrounding her stepped away, separating themselves from my locked gaze. A warning growl left my lips, the sound reverberating down the yard and caused other heads to look down with hers. Benicio froze, fighting the desire to submit, when his head dipped an inch lower before hastily quickening his steps. His wolf recognized me as an Alpha, and instinctively acted upon the pressure he felt. When we reached the patio, I looked at my warriors and told them to stay put. I was only permitted to bring my beta and gamma, which was hard seeing as one was currently missing. Noah would just have to do. Walking inside, I looked around the house and found myself feeling nostalgic again. The last time I was here, I was rejected, beaten down mentally and emotionally, and lastly, forcibly kicked out. My emotions stirred from deep within. Anger from the humiliation I faced, racking up my spine. Anger I wouldn't let myself act upon. "This way, please." I glanced over to him as he led us up the stairs. "Can I please beat them up?" I almost snort, but I hold it in. I turn back at Noah, who seemed very unamused, his eyebrows knit together with a firm scowl on his face. "Unless you want both of us fighting over 100 wolves at the same time, potentially killing half the population, I'll have to say no." Noah rolled his eyes, grumbling under his breath about the disrespect Nightwake has shown and how we could easily handle them. While I know he's letting his irritation do the talking, I neither claim or disclaim his statement. Ignoring him, we were led to the Alpha's office. The door that once held the golden nameplate reading out Alpha Harrison was now changed to Alpha Landon. I frowned, thinking of the disappointment I felt over Harrison Walker's involvement in the treachery. Ignoring the warnings that were sent 3 months prior from the attack, it was his fault as much as it was Benicio's and Landon's. My view on him was ruined in the split second I realized that. "Alpha Landon, Alpha Crestfield, and Beta Jones are here. Come in." Benicio opened the door, gesturing for us to go in first. I strode inside, not sparing a lingering glance toward my mother, Sophie, who sat on the couch. Her eyes widened, bulging out from her skull as she took me in. She had aged. She still looked the same, but the gray starting to sprout from the roots of her hair and the wrinkles forming on her forehead showed me that time had its effect on her. "Please have a seat," Landon said, sounding a little dubious as I didn't look at him. I felt his gaze prickling my skin. Urging me to look at him, I brushed it off without a second thought. Sophie, who still gaped at me like I was a ghost she was seeing, didn't say a word as I sat down at the conference table. The mahogany table I've seen in the past was still there, but at the far side of the center. Benicio stood behind them with Landon in the center. Everyone who was involved in ruining my life was here. My father, my mother, my sister, who I still didn't look at, and lastly, my mate, Landon. Noah was just sitting beside me with a bemused expression on his face. He enjoyed their feelings of discomfort quite a bit. Silence was guaranteed at this awful tension seeping into the room. None of them wanted to say anything. Their reluctance was as clear as day on their faces. If this was the whole point of this meeting, we were going to have a problem. I sighed, crossing my legs, and leaned back against the chair. I stared at Benicio, eyes unblinking as he shifted uncomfortably on his feet. My alpha presence must have made his wolf antsy even though I was his daughter. Wolves would get easily intimidated by an alpha's stare. It could be seen as a challenge or look of disapproval, none of which they would want pointed toward them. Turning my gaze to Landon, who sat opposite of me, I raised a brow. "I would assume this isn't the reason you sought an audience with me? This," I gestured around us, "silence?" He didn't answer. I'm not sure I really expected him to. Just as I thought we'd spend 40 minutes just staring at each other, the beta broke the silence. We just wanted to explain, to apologize." He reasoned. I mentally scoffed. Oh, goddess. My face was completely void of emotion, but inside, I was internally riled from the audacity they had. If anything, I looked completely done with their shit. The thought of them asking for forgiveness did cross my mind, but most of me desperately wished they didn't, so they could save us the meaningless words of apologies in time when we both knew they don't mean it. I don't need empty words. I don't need them. Celine, my daughter, please hear us out. I know we don't deserve it, but your sister is pregnant, and... I held up my hand to stop the man named Benicio Dixon from speaking. I had enough. Surely they didn't call me here just so they can dump all their personal problems onto me or dig up the past. If that was the case, they're quite foolish. I'm not interested in the slightest. Shifting my attention from my father to the woman he stood behind, my gaze narrowed on the small but visible bump under her sundress.